Thank you, Chief. As Chief mentioned, my name is Greg Curran. I'm Lieutenant in charge of Special Investigations, which has the Homeless Outreach Team underneath it, Vice Narcotics, our Crime Suppression Team, and of course the Crimes of Violence Unit, which is handling this case. So we're going to give a brief overview of the incident. As the Chief said, if there's information that you really want to know, it's not that we don't want to tell you. It's, we've met with the District Attorney's Office. We've talked to them about the case and the information that we would like to present and that they would like to present, and that does not include everybody's question. There is information out there that we're just not going to be able to tell you. As the Chief said, our main focus here tonight is to make sure everybody understands that the most important thing is that we get justice for the victim and the victim's family and friends. That is paramount. And with that in mind, I will answer any question I'm able to at the end, but I'm going to go through a timeline that explains the events that evening to the extent we can, understanding that admonishment. We're also going to talk about our investigative procedures that we have and some of the requirements by law that we are required to adhere to, the way we do things and why we do them. There might be some questions as why didn't you do X, why didn't you do Y? We may have some legal requirements that we have to adhere to and the proper procedure in the auspice of we are trying to get that prosecution. We are trying to build a case. We are trying to make sure that the people that are responsible for this face that justice. We're going to talk about our departmental resources that we have, the personnel, some of the equipment and the technology that we use on a daily basis, and specifically in this case to get to the conclusion that we did. This timeline, I know it's possibly difficult to see in the back, but what this timeline does is it gives you a kind of a snapshot as to how our day in Carlsbad went, beginning with the unknown time that we show up there. There was a burglary on Flying Cloud Way. That's important in the grand scheme of the case, and it's one of the questions I've been asked many times is, wasn't there other things going on? And there were other things going on in the neighborhood at the time, mostly as a result of these two suspects. At about, as you can see, 11:32 p.m., we got a prowler call. And a prowler is somebody walking around somebody's house, maybe checking doors or windows. So our officers respond to that. Our general response is we're going to send more than one officer for the simple reason if somebody's trying to break into your house, we're not going to send one officer for one person. We don't know if it's one person. We're going to send multiple officers, and that's what we did on this case. We sent multiple officers to this residence. Some of them were contacting the resident. Others were checking the area, and of course they're checking the area on the way to the call. They're checking the area when they get to the call, and once they get more information from the homeowner. So they were in the process of doing that on Flying Cloud at 11:32. While this is going on, and they were out there using the technology that we've given the officers. And one of those technologies that we have that you may not be aware of, and you may have seen it and not even know you've seen it, is on our spotlights on our vehicles. Some of the vehicles have what's called an infrared system. It's called FLIR, forward-looking infrared. And what that does is in the dark, the officer points that spotlight without it being on in the direction of, say, heavy brush or a neighborhood or down a street where cars are parked. And there's a screen that the officer can look at and it'll show heat signatures. So if somebody's hiding in the bush, this officer, without having to announce their presence, completely dark, can look for that subject. And that's what the officer was doing at the time, in addition to the other officers that were on scene. They're actively looking for the prowlers in this case, which, as we learn later, are connected to the unfortunate incident. So while they're doing that, unfortunately, the crime is being committed at the same time our officers are a short distance away. At 12:29 a.m., we get a 911 call. If for a second you kind of put yourself in that situation, the dispatcher gets a call and hears somebody that's got a difficulty breathing for good reason. But the dispatcher does not know the reason, the difficulty breathing. So it starts out as, are you okay? Do you need help? Medical attention. So that's the first thought that the dispatcher has, is that this is a medical aid call. Once the information comes through from the victim to the dispatcher that she's been attacked, the dispatcher immediately dispatches the officers. So within 2 minutes, officers are dispatched. Because now it's not a medical aid call, it's a stabbing that she's learning. And just for a second, if you're friends or family or you knew her, I can tell you based on the information I have for this case, I am extremely proud of the fortitude that she had to give us a call after suffering this. And it was because of her efforts that got us there so soon, we were able to resolve this in the manner in which we did. So just for a second, if you just think about her and smile about what a wonderful thing she did for herself and for her family, it's truly remarkable what she did. 12:33, less than 4 minutes from the time she called, our officers are on scene at her house, going in and discover her, and immediately, once they made sure that the scene was safe for them, that there was no suspects they had to encounter, they immediately began life-saving measures. And they announced that the fire department could come in to help her as well, which they did. They came in and they loaded her into the ambulance and took her to the hospital. So as you can see how this originally started and how it's come about, we've got officers in the area. They're there as quickly as they possibly could, and the information that she was able to give us directed our investigation from that point. She was able to tell us that it was not somebody she knew. She was able to tell us that the car's gone. The car is now no longer at the residence. So officers are now looking toward this car, and seeing as we could know that it was not a family member, we later learned at 12:26 that vehicle was hit at El Camino Real and Plaza Drive. When I say hit, a license plate reader hit that vehicle, which means it captured that vehicle leaving the city. A license plate reader. Not only did it give us information about where this investigation and where these suspects were headed, it also gave us the ability to put that information out to our law enforcement partners in the area and throughout the state. So now we have that vehicle's information alerted to everybody in this area in law enforcement. And not only law enforcement, but there are tow companies that use mobile license plate readers for their various jobs and reasons, and they're tied into our system. They can't get information from us, but they send us information from those license plate readers. So if a tow truck would have driven past it, we would have gotten alerted on that. So huge information that we got to direct our investigation at the very earliest stages that we possibly could get it. Detectives were called out at 1:05 a.m. At this time, you can imagine the police officers on scene are still doing a lot of work. They are controlling the scene. They're making sure that everything is secured for the detectives, because we have to write search warrants. Even though we are legally inside the victim's house, we now have to write a search warrant to search that house and to collect evidence. That is a legal procedure we are mandated to follow. We do not have discretion. We freeze the scene, we go seek a warrant. The judge has to sign the warrant telephonically to give us permission to look around in that house and do our job, have the investigators continue the investigation. So that process is going on now. That is not a short, simple process. We have a great team of detectives doing that, and they got to work on that right away. We also had, this neighborhood is now a crime scene because the vehicle drove away, and we know about the prowler car, so there are other pieces of evidence that could potentially be out there that we have to make sure we take steps to identify, locate, preserve, and collect if necessary. At 1:30, we learn later, this is when the suspects basically abandon the vehicle. They leave the vehicle in San Marcos. Once that happens, and once we're continuing to do our investigation, we learn that obviously later. This whole time, detectives are following these trails. They're getting more information and they're acting on it. And they're getting information from other law enforcement. They're getting the information from community members. There were business members, business owners that had video of the scenes where the suspects went. And they provided that for us once they found out what we were doing. That being said, I'd like to make sure if anybody has any of that video or thinks they might possibly have a video anywhere in that area or along the path to El Camino Real Plaza, please see me after the presentation. We'll want to get your information, and we'd implore you to share that with us. It may be another piece that will help us with this investigation. So if you have a security system, a doorbell camera, anything of that nature, it would be much appreciated to get that to add to the case. Like I said, the stronger case we can make and build and present to the district attorney and work with them to make this a prosecutable case, the more justice, the more chance of justice for the family and the victim. As the morning goes on, you can see at 5:45 a.m. the vehicle was located by somebody coming to work, and this vehicle is in their parking lot. I said, this vehicle does not belong here. How many times has somebody seen that and not called us? Or just disregarded? It's like, oh, who knows? Kudos to that person. What a great job by calling that vehicle in. And because we had put it in the system through the LPR, the Sheriff's Department knew we need to call Carlsbad PD. Once again, it's an additional crime scene now, which means another warrant, more resources, more detectives that have to do that, time intensive, and we have to collect the evidence that we locate at that scene after we get the warrant. We can't just start collecting things because we can obviously tell it's the right car and there's a crime scene in that car as well. So we have to follow those procedures. While they're doing that, wonderful citizens of this community saw things in their neighborhood that they believed to be out of place. They weren't quite sure, but this is not right. I'm going to take action. That's the kind of action that we need. We cannot, as a police department, protect this community alone. We need the community's help every step of the way. So that's what happened here. Took photos of the subjects in their neighborhood. Another citizen called us and said, there's people doing stuff that I'm not sure they should be doing. Well, if you can imagine the amount of personnel it takes to not only run this scene, to run the scene between here and San Marcos, to run the San Marcos, it is very intensive in terms of a manpower aspect. Do we have time to deal with somebody calling in, just somebody walking through the neighborhood? Yeah. Absolutely we do. It's important. So we took action on that information. Our suspects were then contacted at 10:05, and because of the entirety of this timeline and the work that was done throughout the early morning, we were able to say those were the people responsible and have enough at that point to arrest them and continue the investigation, which is what our detective did for that day, the next day, and has continued to work with the district attorney's office every step of the way. So they know what we know, when we know it, and the cooperation between the district attorney's office and the Carlsbad Police Department has been nothing but outstanding. It has been wonderful. They have been extremely helpful. They've given us guidance. We've given them information, and they've been very appreciative of the manner in which we've gone about this investigation, like I said, with the ultimate goal of providing justice for our victim here. This is a very brief synopsis of what the timeline entailed. There was a lot of work done in this time. There was a lot of outstanding work, a lot of effort by the officers, the CSOs, every member of this department, from the dispatchers to the patrol officers to the detectives that got called out. I'm actually more than proud. I can't even begin to tell you how proud I am to be part of this organization, knowing the information I know about this case. It amazes me, and I work with these people every day, and I've done that for the last 24 years, and they still amaze me at their dedication, their compassion, and their expertise in getting this job done. I really do appreciate the effort they put in every day. With that, a lot of questions come about what is crime in Carlsbad? What does it look like? I don't see it every day. Well, as a lieutenant in this department, we have a crime meeting every Wednesday. We meet, all the lieutenants meet with our crime analyst, with our homeless outreach sergeant, to discuss crime that week. We don't let it get a month old. We don't let it get a year old. We do it every week because we want to stay on top of what the crime trends are. So I'll tell you what the crime statistics are, some of our FBI comparisons for the region, and then violent crime. That's obviously a question on people's minds. What does violent crime look like in Carlsbad? So if you look at this, this is what we actually send, the data that we send to the FBI and to SANDAG for our actual stats here. So if you look, 2017, we did not have any homicides. We had 2 in 2018. One was a murder-suicide. The other was a family member on family member. That subject was put in custody at the scene and is now awaiting trial. So both of those cases have been closed successfully. All the way down to, as we started, this incident started with a residential burglary. As you can see, our residential burglaries from 2017 to 2018 went down 29%. And the reason it went down 29% was because, like I said, we have those weekly meetings, we share the information, and we have the cooperation of our community. Our community tells us when things are wrong and we act on it. We work together. If we didn't have that cooperation, I can tell you these numbers would just continue to skyrocket. And it doesn't happen here because we have that cooperation. So I really do appreciate everybody that takes the time to call in or take a picture or send us video that helps us, whether it's a petty theft up to a violent crime. And if you can see at the bottom corner, which is really overall, crime in Carlsbad from 2017 to 2018 went down 5%. The FBI index of all those crimes that I just listed, if you compare it to the region, the San Diego County, all the jurisdictions average comes out in the red line above, and Carlsbad is the blue line below. So we are below the county average consistently since 2014, and I can tell you if you go back farther, it'll be below then as well. As far as violent crime, this is what we mean by violent crime. These crimes over the classification of homicide, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. Our rate per 1,000 population in Carlsbad is 2.02. 2.02 as compared to the county, which is 3.32. So it sounds like it's a one difference. It's really actually 66% of what the county average is, well below what the county average is. And once again, I said that's a testament to the men and women of this department, dispatchers, CSOs, rangers, police officers, in conjunction with the community, in conjunction with the technology that we've been given to use to combat crime, to using the resources, the pieces of equipment like the FLIR, the LPR. Those things all play a part in how we get our numbers to be so low. Not one officer can control it, not one citizen can control it. Not one piece of technology can control it. It has to be part of the puzzle, has to be used together so that the community and the police department are really one. And once we achieve that, we can see our numbers go even further down. And that's the trend we want to continue on. So with that, Sergeant De Velasco is going to come up and talk about the homeless outreach team and what we've done with that.